mi son svegliato, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 una mattina mi son svegliato, ho trovato l'invaso, oh partigiano, portami via, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 partigiano, portami via, che mi sento di morire. E se muoio da partigiano, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 e se muoio da partigiano, tu mi devi seppellire, mi seppellirai lassù in montagna, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 mi seppellirai lassù in montagna, sotto l'ombra di un bel fiore, oh sotto l'ombra di un bel fiore, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 sotto l'ombra di un bel fiore, tu mi devi seppellire, e le genti che passeranno, oh bella una mattina mi son svegliato. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Una mattina mi son svegliato, ho trovato l'invaso.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Stearman. I am Vice Chair on the Board of the Parliament of the World's Religions. I'm glad that you're present for this session. I have a brief announcement before we really begin in just about 90 seconds. You're going to hear in this session a great deal about what is wrong in the world, and I want to give you opportunity to join a few folks who are about trying to fix some of that wrong by bringing direct and energetic advocacy around the freedom of the religion, freedom to worship with your own religion, and the freedom to believe and to have the freedom to have your own conscience, to believe or not to believe. After this session, there will be a meeting of the International Freedom Roundtable, International Religious Freedom Roundtable. There's been meeting in DC for the last number of years weekly. We're having our meeting here. It will take place downstairs in room E258. It was to take place in this space, but this is a move and necessity. And so you're all invited, share with your friends to come and join us with a historic moment where for the first time ever, this roundtable will be meeting as a parliament. Enjoy this session.
Please welcome Trustee, Program Chair of the 2023 Parliament of the World's Religions, Chair of the Women's Task Force, Awakened Priestess, Attorney and Author, Phyllis Curott.
Hello, brave souls. Thank you for joining us today. It's my privilege to welcome you to the Parliament of the World's Religions Plenary on the crisis of authoritarianism. And it is going to be a terrific plenary. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then, they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then, they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak. Thank you. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. These are words of contrition, written after the Second World War by a Lutheran pastor, Martin Niemöller. These are also words of warning. I understand this warning. My mother was Jewish, and I am a priestess of a persecuted faith. I am a witcher. I am a memory keeper for the tens of thousands, mostly women, who were tortured and murdered. I understand this warning. Today, we are all standing at a pivotal moment where history seeks to repeat itself. It's a moment of urgency. An existential, growing global scourge has returned. It is manifesting in tyrants and strongmen who commit crimes against humanity, suppress fundamental freedoms, subvert democracies, and murder the truth with lies. They intimidate with threats and violent mobs. They imprison and they murder their critics. They wink at domestic terrorism, and they pursue nationalist wars. Bullies and despots dehumanize us because of our ethnicity, our nationality, our political affiliation, or who we love, because we are immigrants or refugees, because of our race or our religion. They foster hate and they stoke fear by turning us, whoever we are, into the other. They seek to divide us and undermine the values that all our faiths hold dear, to live with compassion and justice and love. All over the world, we are witnessing the erosion of religious freedom and the persecution of minorities. Everywhere we turn, the dignity, autonomy, and human rights of women are under assault. And what is done to women is always done to the earth. It is a stark reality. It is a stark reality that transcends borders, cultures, and faiths. A reality that demands our collective action and moral courage. As people of faith and spirit, we have a singular responsibility. Here is the truth we must all confront and change. Despots are misappropriating religions to justify the unjustifiable. Tyrants proclaim themselves saviors, posturing with religious symbols and exploiting language to affirm their power. And tragically, there are religious leaders who stand beside them and religious communities who cheer them. Putin declares himself the defender of Russian orthodoxy and justifies his invasion of Ukraine as the restoration of Holy Rus, supported by the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. In India, Prime Minister Modi, his power is increasingly exerted with restrictions on religion and other freedoms, and Hindutva nationalism is spreading with rampant admiration for Nazism, hatred of Muslims, and anti-Semitic rhetoric. Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel, on trial for corruption, has forged an alliance with the extreme and theocratic right, with dire consequences for the future of Israel's liberal democracy, for its citizens, and for the 2.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank. In Hungary, authoritarian leader Viktor Orban declared himself the defender of Christianity against immigrant hordes, silencing the press and stifling dissent, and he is adored by American conservatives. Just a few months ago, the world's foremost international conservative gathering, the Conservative Political Action Conference, returned to Budapest and again invited Orban to deliver the keynote where he attacked immigrants and woke culture. And here in the US, clutching an upside-down Bible, Donald Trump courts and condones white Christian nationalists. They've become one of his most powerful weapons, along with faith-based media and messaging. And rituals of Christian worship are now energizing conservative rallies and Trump campaign events with praise music and prayer, blending with political anger. Demagogues and dictators are sharing their strategies, messaging, and data collection. They support each other, fund each other, and arm each other. And they are supported by religious leaders and followers who are more than bystanders. They are beneficiaries, trading collaboration for the imposition of their values and beliefs on those who do not share them. And there are religious leaders who are the dictators, presiding over the debasement of faith in its most extreme, cruel, and oppressive form, theocracy. This is not who we are. Every faith has, at its core, a summoning to ease the suffering of others. When we live by those values that we share, love, compassion, and respect for one another, we heal autocracy's poison. And when we live by our values, we shatter the illusion of the enemy other. We live the truth of our interconnectedness and our shared humanity. Our fates are intertwined. At this pivotal and dangerous moment, we must find the courage to speak truth to power, and we must open our hearts to one another. For when we do, we dismantle the walls of hatred that fascists seek to build. The world is watching us. Let us be defenders of truth amidst the deluge of misinformation. Let us be beacons of hope in the face of darkness. Let us be champions of love in the presence of hatred. Let us work together towards a future where fascism finds no harbor, where we recognize one another as sisters and brothers. Let us inspire those who are watching us to join us in creating a world where compassion, justice, and freedom prevail. Thank you. May blessings be upon us all.
I pay my respects to the spiritual leaders present here today. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I am so grateful to the Parliament for choosing the theme, defending freedom and human rights. This subject is so dear to me that I have devoted almost my whole life on this. Today I will be talking on the subject of justice and punishment, crucial aspect of defending the human rights. There are two approaches to deal with the perpetrators of the human rights violations. One approach is of restorative justice, that is forgiveness and reconciliation. This approach is more suitable in the case of conflict between the two communities. But in case of genocide, the other approach, that is the retributive justice, that is the punishment, that is more suitable. Because the genocides are committed by the people who are in power. And while in power, they do it for the purpose of the political gain, and after that they remain in power for a long time and they feel nobody can touch them and they can do whatever they feel like. It is absolutely necessary to put a fear in the mind of the people in power that a day will come in their life that they will have to face the consequences sooner or later. So therefore, in case of the case genocides, the approach of retributive justice, that is the punishment to the perpetrators, is must. With this object in mind, I have been fighting the cases of the Sikh genocide of 1984 since last 39 years. Now what happened in November 1984 in Delhi, the capital of the largest democracy of the world, that is the worst massacre which has happened in any democracy in the world. Unfortunately, this is also the most less talked about genocides on the international platform. In November 1984, over 4,000 Sikhs were killed and burnt brutally on the streets of Delhi. Over 50,000 properties belonging to Sikhs were reduced to ashes. Countless Sikh women were raped. Now this was happening throughout Delhi, and these were the mobs who were led by the leaders of the ruling party Congress, and they were supported by the police and the paramilitary forces. Now what was happening in Delhi? To give you an idea, I will tell you the story of just one locality, that is Kalyanpuri. In Kalyanpuri on November 1st morning, the mob led by the local Congress councillor attacked the houses of the Sikhs. The Sikhs started firing from their licensed weapons. The mob could not dare even to come close to the Sikh houses. Soon thereafter, the police reached there in large number. The police assured the Sikhs that we are here to protect you, you hand over your guns. Police seized 25 guns from Sikhs. Thereafter, the mob attacked. The mob killed 500 Sikhs in that area alone. Not only that, over 100 Sikh girls, including the minors, they were abducted, taken to a nearby park, and those goons used to come at night with the torches and pick over whichever girl they have liked. Now this was happening throughout Delhi. The Sikhs were killed by betrayal and by treachery. If the police had not seized their guns, they were capable enough of protecting them, protecting their family, protecting their women. But unfortunately, the police supported the mobs in killing Sikhs. At that time, I was just 29 years old and I had just started my practice. I took up the cases of the victims and started the cases against these perpetrators. Most of them were at that time powerful leaders of Congress. They were sitting ministers, they were members of parliament. This scuttled all our effort. Battle after battle, now we fought but unfortunately, these people manipulated the system that we did not succeed. Ultimately, after 34 years, in 2018, we had our first major victory when a member of parliament, a member of legislative assembly, and a member and a councillor were given life imprisonment. They are in jail as we speak today. But our fight is far from over. Our fight against the perpetrators is still continuing, and we will chase them and we will pursue them. The Sikhs of Delhi have forgiven the common people of Delhi. The Sikhs have reconciled between these two approaches of forgiveness and punishment, but the Sikhs have not forgiven the mastermind, and they will continue chasing the masterminds. The fact that the Sikhs have forgiven the common people of Delhi is sufficiently evident from what they did during the pandemic in 2020, when they distributed free langars, they distributed free medicines, they distributed free oxygen equipments. Now, the same people who in 1984 were frantically looking for the Sikhs on the streets of the Delhi to kill them and to burn them, in 2020, the same people were looking for the Sikhs on the streets of Delhi with a view and hope to get some food, to get some medicine, and to get some oxygen equipment. The Gurdwaras which they burnt in 1984 to ashes, in 2020, the people queued up in long queues in front of the same Gurdwaras with the hope that they will get free food, they will get clothes, they will get medicines and oxygen equipments. Now, this is the Sikh character, and this is what we have learnt from our masters and our religion have taught us. Sarvat da Pala is the rule with which the Sikhs believe in and the Sikhs follow. But at the same time, the Sikhs will not give up the fight against the mastermind, against the perpetrators. We will chase them and we will continue to chase them. We have still a long way to go. I request all of you here to please pray to the Almighty God that we may succeed in our fight against injustice. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.
Please welcome Executive Director of the Uyghur Human Rights Project and Executive Committee Chairman of the World Uyghur Congress, Omar Kanat.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the honor of speaking today. My name is Omar Kanat. I am a Uyghur from East Turkestan. Uyghurs are a Turkic Muslim people with a rich culture and history. Our homeland, East Turkestan, is rich and strategically important. Uyghur people adopted Islam more than 1,000 years ago. But China currently rules our homeland, which they call our homeland Xinjiang, which means new territory. The Chinese government is crushing our people, committing atrocity crimes based on our ethno-religious identity. Researchers say China's atrocity against the Uyghur people are the largest attack on a targeted ethnic religious group since World War II. Chinese government's persecution of Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in East Turkestan has been going on since the Communist China took over the control of our homeland in 1949. But in 2017, Chinese government's systematic assimilation policy turned into an all-out war against the Uyghur people. Since 2017, the Chinese government has rounded up an estimated 1.8 to 3 million Uyghurs and other Turkic people without charge or trial and put them in concentration camps. Thousands of intellectuals are in prison, serving long sentences suddenly announced to them when they were already in prison. Inside the concentration camp, I can tell you the words of a Uyghur woman who managed to survive the camp. Gulbahar spent 2 years in the camp. This is what she has said. We were beaten if we prayed. We had to be careful not to put both hands on our mouth when we were eating because the guards said, you are secretly praying. We could not close our eyes for even a few moments when we were in political indoctrination classes for 11 hours every day. If we closed our eyes, the guards said we were praying and punished us severely. Outside the camps, our mosques and pilgrimage sites have been bulldozed. Research by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute estimate of at least 16,000 mosques destroyed or desecrated since 2017. One mosque was made into a nightclub, another was made into a public toilet. The remaining are tourist sites. In 2021, Uyghur Human Rights Project, my organization, and Justice for All issued a joint report on the mass detention of imams, Uyghur imams. We compiled a list of 1,046 imams in East Turkestan who were detained since 2014. But it is a tip of the iceberg. The true number is certainly much larger. In some cases, the imam's entire family who was also detained and taken into the camps. Not only their children, but also their grandchildren. But it's not only imams. Every Uyghur family has had relatives taken away. The leaked documents called Xinjiang police files, which were published 22nd of May 2022, include police photos of people as young as 14 and as old as 82, taken into the police custody. Even children as young as 6 can be found in the files. According to researchers, about 1 million Uyghur children have been taken from their families and put into the custody of the state. In these so-called boarding schools, they suffer the grief of losing all contact with their parents. The children are intensively trained to hate Islam or any other religion. But the government goes even further. To make sure the Uyghur women will not have children at all in the future, police have called in all women to have forced insertion of birth control, or they are sterilized by force. Men and women are forced to work in factories far away from their homelands, from their villages, so they cannot marry and form families. The birth rate dropped by 50% between 2017 and 2019. Truly, it's a plan to make the Uyghurs disappear. That's why we say it is a genocide. Because of the scale and scope of the atrocities being committed by the Chinese authorities, 11 parliaments around the world have passed resolutions condemning the atrocities. The UN High Commissioner on Human Rights issued a report on August 31st, 2022, officially recognizing that horrific crimes are occurring. The report confirmed evidence of torture, arbitrary detention, and enforced disappearances, and other international human rights crimes. The report concluded that they may amount to crimes against humanity. The US has imposed 119 sanctions, targeted sanctions, against Chinese entities and individuals who are complicit in this genocide. 3 times since January 2022, the International Labour Organization has made unprecedented statements of concern about China's state-sponsored forced labor. Of course, the Chinese government says that any criticism of its actions is a plot by the West to prevent China's rise. China floods the media in many countries, especially Muslim-majority countries, with stories saying the suffering of Uyghurs is, quote, the lie of the century. In spite of all these condemnations, little has changed on the ground because of lack of internationally coordinated action, and genocide is ongoing. The bottom line is that China has succeeded in recruiting non-democratic governments to deny that it is carrying out genocide and Islamophobia. Muslim voices of conscience are speaking out, which gives us hope. Jewish and Christian voices are also speaking up. Uyghurs have been invited to give talks at mosques, masjids from Florida to Northern Virginia, at synagogues from New York to Washington, and at churches across the country. We take hope from this support. I end with an appeal. I ask all brothers and sisters here to take concrete actions. Please help us in raising awareness about atrocity crimes being committed by the Chinese government against the Uyghur people. Please contact your government and members of parliament and Congress to ask them to take action to stop the Uyghur genocide or sponsor the legislations already introduced. Please sponsor Uyghur refugees to find safe haven. You can donate to our initiatives to bring 10,000 Uyghur refugees to safe haven in Canada by using the PayPal button on the UHRP website. Please ask your imams, your pastors, your priests, or your rabbis to invite a Uyghur speaker to your community to give personal testimony about our parents, about our sisters, our aunts, our uncles who are currently disappeared or died in state custody. In conclusion, I'm sure we have your sympathy and your solidarity. For this, Uyghurs are extremely grateful. We also need your action. Thank you.
Please welcome teacher, speaker, and international consultant on leadership innovation and cultural change, Sousan Abadian.
Greetings, beloved sisters, brothers, and my non-binary siblings. I begin again by paying homage to the traditional spiritual guardians of this land that has so generously provided refuge to me and my family and many of us here. Those original caretakers who first cherished these sacred lands and lakes, whose ancestors lived and died here, gathered and did sacred rituals here for many thousands of years before we ever set foot as extended guests on their territories. We cannot make up for all that they have lost. I thank them and humbly request those guardians in the spirit realm to watch over these proceedings. May our thoughts, words, and actions be worthy and aligned with the highest good of all our human family and non-human relatives. I also call upon the wisdom keepers from my own Zoroastrian lineage who have also survived against all odds, those who have gone before me and stand behind me, and I acknowledge myself as one among them in a long and unbroken line of lineage keepers. I thank you for welcoming me here in the name of this most ancient order. Today I speak in both my capacities as a scholar and a spiritual elder. This gathering has put out a call to conscience. Many of us here sense that we were born for this time period, this time of great crisis and opportunity. What are we being called to be and do? And how do we join hands to be and do it together? I feel deeply moved to be here, to amplify this call to conscience, in part because it's part of the origin story of my birth tradition, which began with the sounding of the call thousands of years ago. The Gathas, or sacred hymns attributed to Zarathustra, known as Zoroaster by the West as the founder of Zoroastrianism, opens with the same call to conscience and asks, who among you will step up to address the suffering and injustices rampant in our world? Zoroastrian dynasty had a chivalric tradition called Asp Abad, and which influenced Western chivalry. Iranians have, from time immemorial, sounded a call to all of the knights of light, regardless of gender, to defend and create all that is life-affirming, true, and beautiful. We have sounded the call to honor our ultimate power, the power of choice, to choose expansive love and shared liberation. Part of that call is a call not just to conscience, but to a greater consciousness, which requires awareness of our toxic stories and the choice we have to co-create a new story. The collective stories and beliefs of humanity have the power to shape our realities going forward. In my recently published book, Generative Cultural Renewal, I explore what it means to weave a new story. I emphasize the word generative because not all attempts at cultural renewal are generative. They do not all bring benefit to humanity, and in fact often increase, not decrease, our trauma footprint. To create a new, more generative story, we have to begin by asking ourselves how aspects of our religions subtly and not so subtly damage people, damage our relationships, and damage our natural world. We can courageously ask, how much traumatic damage have our religions done and are doing out of pure arrogance? For example, the belief that we have the one best way and only way to God, or that we have the one truth. Religious literacy, perhaps, should include not just the feel-good elements of how wonderful our faiths are, but literacy means the humility and integrity to bring awareness to the shadow side of our religions. Thank you. This includes questioning the prevailing religious beliefs that speak of a sinful and not to be trusted humanity that needs saving by an outside superior force, whether a messiah or now artificial intelligence. Moreover, some are apparently worthy of being saved while others are not. According to these narratives, the divine is punitive and women have limited value. Earth herself may not even be worth redeeming, since the spiritual and material realms are considered separate, with the spiritual superior to the material. Life on Earth is not cherished. So it's no wonder with a story like this that we have the world we have. Generative cultural renewal entails not only preservation and restoration, but also making significant alterations in our beliefs in order to reduce our trauma footprint. Let us together resolve to tell a different story, one that Iranians have been chanting in the streets, Zan Zendagi Azadi, woman, life, freedom. And I would add a fourth phrase to the important trio, Zamin, or earth. In my birth country, the brave and courageous people of Iran are heeding the call to conscience. And for doing so, they are being indiscriminately killed, raped, blinded, and tortured. Let us show them that they have the support of countless millions around the world taking up their call to woman life freedom. Let them know they're not alone. As I shared this morning during the Women's Assembly, This call, Zan Zendagi Azadi Zamin, Woman, Life, Freedom, Earth, is not just a call of remembrance for Iranians. It's for all of humanity, a call for all of us to restore ourselves to our ancient knowing. Regardless of whatever the religion we identify with now, all our indigenous wisdom traditions knew of the sacredness of the earth, the natural world, cherished the women who birthed us into this glorious, beautiful earth, valued the preciousness of life on earth, and entrusted us with the freedom to explore truth in order to spiritually evolve. Woman, Life, Freedom, Earth is a call to conscience for all humankind. It might seem as though the forces of aggression and oppression are gaining ground, as we currently witness the surge of authoritarianism around the world and the increasing destruction of our planet. But let me offer a hopeful perspective for our times. As we feel coerced, subjugated, denied our freedoms as though we are losing ground, this can elicit in us a powerful impulse to break free. We have a choice to use this pullback as an evolutionary tension that can shoot us forward. Imagine this. It is as though the string of a bow is being drawn back, and when it is taut, it will then snap forward in an accelerated rate, catapulting the arrow towards the bullseye of healing, greater freedom, and justice. As we experience encroaching oppression and suffering, we can choose to have this current pullback accelerate our expansion into higher consciousness and a global cultural renaissance. In closing, let us together dream a new dream for humanity. Let us bravely rewrite our collective stories. Let us enter into a global conversation about what generativity means and how we can get there together. I ask you, who is prepared to join me in renewing the pledge in defense and celebration of the future, the earth and all her children? Thank you.
ओम वर्तमान युग विकास का युग। आज के समय में बौद्धिक, आर्थिक, बौद्धिक और तकनीकी रूप में मनुष्य बड़ा समृद्ध और सशक्त दिखाई पड़ता है, लेकिन आंतरिक रूप में वो उतना ही कमजोर और खोखला दिखता है। ऐसा लगता है कि मनुष्य की बाह्य शक्तियां तो दिनों दिन विस्तीर्ण होते जा रही है, पर वह स्वयं शक्तिहीन होता जा रहा है। आज के मनुष्य की स्थिति उस लाठी की तरह है जो ऊपर से रंगी पुती तो दिखती है, पर भीतर से खोखली है, जिसमें घुन लगा है। ऐसी लाठी लुभावनी तो हो सकती है, लेकिन सहारा नहीं बन सकती। जब तक मनुष्य अंदर से मजबूत नहीं होगा, तब तक सच्चे अर्थों में उसे समर्थ नहीं बनाया जा सकता। आज विश्व में एक तरफ आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस का दौर आ गया है, लेकिन दूसरी तरफ देखते हैं तो मनुष्य उतना ही परेशान है। डर, चिंता, अवसाद जैसी बीमारियों से वो बुरी तरह जकड़ा हुआ है। आए दिन विश्व में नई नई समस्याएं विकसित हो रही। इन समस्याओं से बचने के लिए हमें एक ही रास्ता है, वो है धर्म। मुझे बहुत प्रसन्नता है कि आज विश्व धर्म संसद में एक साथ बैठकर फिर से धर्म और धर्म की महिमा की बात की जा रही। मैं तो ये कहूँगा, सच्चे अर्थों में देखा जाए तो धर्म के लिए किसी संसद की जरूरत नहीं है, जरूरत धर्मियों के लिए। जो धर्मी हैं वे यदि धर्म को धारण कर ले तो सारे विश्व में धर्म का संसद बन जाएगा। जब कभी हम धर्म की बात करते हैं तो हमारी दृष्टि प्रायः हमारे अपनी अपनी धार्मिक मान्यताओं पर केंद्रित हो जाती है। मैं कहता हूं, धर्म का संबंध हमारी धार्मिक मान्यताओं से कम हमारे अंदर के परिणति से ज्यादा है। हर व्यक्ति के हृदय में धर्म का वास होना चाहिए, और आज के संदर्भ में यदि सबसे बड़ा कोई धर्म है तो वह है मानवता का धर्म। मानव मात्र में मानवीय मूल्यों की प्रतिष्ठा ही हमारा ध्येय और लक्ष्य होना चाहिए। मानवता आज की सबसे बड़ी जरूरत है, और जब तक हम इस दृष्टिकोण को विकसित नहीं करेंगे तब तक हम अपने जीवन में कुछ नहीं कर पाएंगे। आज संपूर्ण विश्व में सबसे ज्यादा अगर कमी दिखती है तो संवेदनशीलता की दिखती है। आज का मनुष्य अत्यधिक संवेदन शून्य होता जा रहा है। बौद्धिक विकास के इस दौर ने सबसे ज्यादा मनुष्य की संवेदना को प्रभावित किया, और संवेदनहीनता के कारण मनुष्य की प्रवृत्तियां स्वार्थ प्रेरित और आत्म केंद्रित हो गई। वो अपने अतिरिक्त अन्यों की तरफ कुछ देखना ही नहीं चाहता। हमें चाहिए कि मनुष्य के हृदय में संवेदनशीलता का विकास करने का प्रयास करें, और ये संवेदनशीलता तभी बढ़ेगी जब हम सह-अस्तित्व की भावना का विकास करेंगे। सह-अस्तित्व की भावना का मतलब है जैसे मैं हूं वैसे ही अन्य प्राणी है, जैसे मेरा अस्तित्व है वैसे अन्य प्राणियों का अस्तित्व है, जैसे मेरी आत्मा है वैसी अन्य प्राणियों की आत्मा है, जैसे मैं सुख से जीना चाहता हूं वैसे अन्य प्राणी भी सुख से जीना चाहते हैं, जैसे मैं दुख से बचता हूं वैसी संसार के अन्य प्राणी भी दुख से बचना चाहते हैं, जैसे मैं जीना चाहता हूं वैसे ही संसार के अन्य प्राणी भी जीना चाहते हैं, जैसे मैं मरना नहीं चाहता वैसे ही संसार के अन्य प्राणी भी मरना नहीं चाहते। तत्वतः जैसे मेरी आत्मा है वैसे ही संसार के प्रत्येक प्राणी की आत्मा है। इसलिए मेरा एक कर्तव्य है, जियो और जीने दो, जो भगवान महावीर का संदेश। खुद जियो और औरों को जीने दो। सर्वभूतात्मा भावना की आज विश्व को सर्वाधिक आवश्यकता है। सबकी आत्मा एक सी है, सब में एक सी समान आत्मा है, और जब हम इस समानता के भाव को अपने हृदय में जागृत करेंगे तभी अपने साथ औरों का ख्याल रखा जा सकेगा, तभी हम अपने साथ औरों को संभाल पाएंगे, और तभी हमारा हृदय अपने अतिरिक्त औरों के प्रति संवेदनशील बनेगा। आत्मौपौम्य की उदात्त दृष्टि भगवान महावीर के संदेशों के अनुसार आया तुला पयासु, सबको अपने समान देखो, यही आज पूरे विश्व को इसी बात की सबसे ज्यादा जरूरत है, इसकी आवश्यकता है। हम अपने अंदर की संवेदनशीलता को व्यापक बनाएं। जितना हम अपने विषय में सोचते हैं उतना ही हम औरों के विषय में भी सोचने की कोशिश करें। कदाचित अपने हितों की पूर्ति करें तो उसमें कोई बात नहीं, लेकिन अपने हितों की पूर्ति के पीछे औरों के हितों की उपेक्षा न करें, उनका घात न करें, तो हम अपने जीवन में कुछ कर सकेंगे। संवेदना को जागृत करना है, जो हम सह-अस्तित्व की भावना से ही कर सकते हैं। आजकल इसका घोर अभाव देखने को मिल रहा है। जितना अधिक मानवीय मूल्यों का ह्रास आज हुआ उतना अतीत में कभी नहीं हुआ। इस संवेदनशीलता के अभाव में ही सब चीजें छिन्न भिन्न हुई है। हमें उन्हें संभालना पड़ेगा। जब तक हम सह-अस्तित्व की भावना नहीं जगाएंगे तब तक हमारे हृदय में अहिंसा, करुणा, प्रेम, परस्परता, बंधुत्व जैसे उदात्त जीवन मूल्य प्रतिष्ठित नहीं होंगे। विडंबना यह है कि आज उसके स्थान हमारी बढ़ती हुई संवेदनहीनता के कारण अहिंसा का स्थान हिंसा ने ले लिया, करुणा का स्थान क्रूरता ने ले लिया। आज परस्परता स्वार्थपरता में बदल गई, बंधुत्व की भावना आज समाप्त होते जा रही है, प्रेम घृणा का रूप लेता जा रहा है। उसने मनुष्य को अत्यंत क्रूर और संवेदनहीन बना दिया, निष्ठुर बना दिया, जिससे हमारे जीवन में बहुत सारी समस्याएं विकसित हुई है। हमें इस पर बहुत गंभीरता से ध्यान देने की जरूरत है। विश्व धर्म संसद के इस मंच से मैं एक ही बात कहूंगा कि एक ही संदेश आज इस मंच के माध्यम से पूरे विश्व में गूंजे, वह है जियो और जीने दो। हम खुद जिए और औरों को जीने देने की बात करें, अपने समान औरों को भी हम गिनना शुरू करें, तो हम निश्चित अपने जीवन को उसके चरम उत्कर्ष तक पहुंचा पाएंगे और विश्व में धर्म की वास्तविक स्थापना कर पाएंगे। सबके जीवन में वैसा धर्म प्रतिष्ठित हो और सब मिलजुल करके सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् की उक्ति को चरितार्थ करेंगे। इसी भाव के साथ यहीं पर विराम।
Please welcome the Midwest Director for the Anti-Defamation League, David Goldenberg.
So this wealthy couple has a bunch of college students over to their home. And out back, there's this beautiful lake. And the woman says to these students, hey, listen, in that lake is a turtle stuck on a stone. If any of you can get to that stone and that rock and pick up the turtle and bring it back to the shore safely, we'll give you anything you want. Wealth, a trip, we'll pay for college, whatever you need. But here's the catch. The lake is filled with piranhas. So they sit there for a couple minutes and, well, no one moves. So the couple shrugs and they turn around and start walking back into their home. When all of a sudden, there's a splash and they turn back and there's a kid bobbing and weaving in and out away from the piranhas, gets to the rock, stands up, dripping wet, takes a deep breath, bends down, picks up the turtle, jumps back into the lake, back and forth in between the piranhas. Finally gets to the shore and the couple comes running around the corner and they say, that was amazing. What is it that we can give you? What is it that you want? And the student looks at them, shrugs their shoulders and says, I just want to know who pushed me in the lake. Now I know in this room, many of us have been pushed into the lake, but I also know that all of us have had to absorb one crisis after another in recent years. Houses of worship are targeted by individuals driven by hateful ideologies with violent tendencies. The rule of law and core democratic principles are regularly challenged through preposterous claims that elections are rigged and the targeting and harassment of election workers. Elements of conspiracy theories like QAnon and the Great Replacement theory, rooted in anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and hate, can now be found in the policies of mainstream political parties. Jews, members of the AAPI and LGBTQ community, and others continue to be scapegoated for the problems of the world. Extreme statements made by politicians and elected officials that it would have previously been disqualifying them from holding office instead give them 5 to 10-point bumps in the polls. The implications are dangerous and even deadly. Vicious rhetoric is no longer an abstract issue. Instead, it is a dangerous and destabilizing force that can manifest in the real world and impels individuals to act violently. Perhaps it is fitting that today we sit literally just a couple blocks away from where the Anti-Defamation League was founded in 1913. ADL's timeless mission to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all remains as relevant and important today as it did 110 years ago. It is, and it has always been, our belief that you can't fight one form of hate without fighting them all. Now let's be clear. None of what we are going through is and none of what we are going through should be normal. Yes, it may feel normal based on the events of the last few years, but it is not. Second, the emotions of anger and frustration and helplessness and even fear are reasonable. While victims are often resilient, humans weren't made to withstand this level of trauma on a daily basis. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we have the power to demand and drive change, because I truly believe there are more of us willing to fight hate than those trying to normalize it. ADL believes that we must respond to the haters with the same intentionality and energy that we see from them. And we cannot do this alone. Our approach to fight hate leans heavily on listening and building partnerships, investigating and conducting necessary research, educating and training, and advocating and assisting victims of hate incidents. For example, for decades, the Black and Jewish communities have been the most targeted communities when it comes to identity-based hate crimes in the United States. That's why ADL partnered with the National Urban League this year to launch the Community Solidarity and Safety Coalition. We have built a cross-community alliance of non-governmental and non-partisan leaders working to collectively address common community safety issues, especially focused on communities that have been targeted most by hate-fueled violence and domestic terrorism. ADL and the National Urban League have also launched Project Code, an acronym for the Collaborative Organizations to End Domestic Extremism. Then, to mark the 2-year anniversary of the release of the Biden administration's National Strategy to Counter Domestic Terrorism, we held our inaugural symposium in June on political violence and domestic extremism. More than 55 civil rights and democracy protection organizations came together in Washington, D.C., to assess the effectiveness of the U.S. government's interagency response to extremism and political violence, to identify gaps and to plan for collaborative action as we prepare for the 2024 election here in the United States. Now, here in the Midwest, here in Chicago specifically, in the aftermath of the tragic shooting of Black grocery shoppers in Buffalo, New York, I called my good friend, and who you're going to hear from right after me, Karen Freeman-Wilson, the leader of the Chicago Urban League. Karen and I decided to launch an anti-hate table to bring together groups affected by ongoing hate crimes and identity-based incidents. With less than 48 hours notice, nearly 50 groups representing a broad spectrum of communities joined our call. Now, we asked everyone 2 questions. 1, what are you most worried about? And 2, what can my community do to support yours? To a T, every person answered that first question with, none of us are safe, and my community could be next. And to number 2, many responded, I don't know how you can help me yet, but thank you for asking. That rarely happens. Because of my job, I'm often asked, what can someone do to respond to the current environment? My answer often focuses on 3 big things. 1, speak out when an act of hate occurs. 2, use facts to respond to the lies and misinformation that we know drive hate wherever and whenever you have to. And 3, show strength by supporting victims even when you and your community are not the ones being targeted. The thing is, you don't need a pulpit or a podium or a TV show, or you don't have to lead the ADL or another organization or religion that's here today. You can actually take these actions on your own, at home, with your friends, in your workplace, in spheres and circles where you have influence. Each of us has a responsibility to play a constructive role in the transformational change that is so desperately needed in our world today. And I look forward to seeing the great work each of us will accomplish together. Thank you.
Please welcome President and CEO of the Chicago Urban League, Karen Freeman-Wilson.
Good afternoon. I am humbled to join this wonderful assembly and bring you greetings on behalf of the Chicago Urban League. The League was established in 1916 to help Southern blacks who were migrating to the North in large numbers become settled into their new communities. These men and women fled the brutality and limited economic opportunities of the segregated South to seek a better life for themselves and their families. There are countless tales of Chicagoans whose roots are in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and many points south. My own father was born in rural Louisiana and was sent to the neighboring city of Gary, Indiana, because my grandmother feared that his protest of double standards would get him killed. From the first day we opened our doors 107 years ago, the Chicago League has fought to ensure that Black Chicagoans have access to jobs, housing, and education through programming and advocacy. Over the years, we added business opportunities and leadership development. You might say that the team at the Chicago Urban League lives out the conference theme of fighting to protect human rights every day. I know that many of you are engaged in this work as well. As I thought about the theme in the context of our collective work, I thought about the fact that the existence of the need to defend something implies that there is a force working against us on the other side. Our fight for freedom is a direct challenge to those who fight to deny freedom. The reason that we at the Chicago Urban League are engaged in the same work after over a century is that there are people all over the world who are committed to ensuring that our work does not succeed. And that is why the work that each of you do is so important. Today we're joined by many freedom fighters, including my friend that you just heard, David Goldenberg from ADL. We are allies because we understand that those who castigate Jewish people are just as likely to spew hatred against Blacks, Latinos, Muslims, Asians, and anyone else who may be different. It is this allyship, this cooperation, that can bring us the progress that we desperately need. If ADL or the Urban League or some other well-intentioned organization simply works to protect the rights of our group alone, then those who are looking to deny those rights will simply engage us in a tug of war. But when we have allies who will strategize and fight with us, we can overcome those who are the enemies of good. As a little girl, Growing up in Gary, Indiana, I learned an early lesson that I would venture to say that many of you learned as well. Whenever a group decision had to be made, the majority ruled. Whether it was what book would be read to us at story hour or the game that we would play at recess, every kindergartner had a voice. There are too many of us who have forgotten that lesson. We stand silently by while a small group of vocal people single out some people and oppose their right to life of dignity and worth. So, that's right. So the call to conscience today is not to change the minds of that vocal minority who fight against freedom, but to ensure that the silent majority will stand up and speak up. Those of us who know better must insist that we all do better. That is the Chicago Urban League's superpower. Not just speaking truth to power, but insisting that each of us must declare that we are a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. In May 2020, after the murder of George Floyd triggered a global reckoning with 400 years of racism exacerbated by the inequities laid bare by a global pandemic, many of us made a pledge to do more to end the racial wealth gap and institutional racism. Most of us who made this commitment were already engaged in that fight. If we are to live up to the true meaning of our nation's pledge that all men are created equal, notwithstanding the fact that my ancestors were explicitly excluded from that promise, we must recognize and embrace our collective role in making world equality a reality. Our organizational missions must be ancillary to the fight for justice for all, because the truth is that if I engage in that fight on behalf of everyone, then we all win, and we will all, in the end, see that discrimination in any form is eradicated. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you.
Please welcome founding Executive Director of Faith in Public Life, Reverend Jennifer Butler.
Good afternoon. Boy, thank you for hanging in with this tough topic, but I am so glad we're in here in such great company and such inspiring leaders. Transformative, nonviolent movements have galvanized millions in the last century and a half to bring about apartheid, segregation, to bring an end to apartheid, segregation, and repressive regimes around the world. And religious beliefs that are rooted in the concept of universal human dignity and freedom were inspirational in these movements. These are testimonies to the power of religious principles driving progress for humanity and the planet. But today, aided by social media, autocrats are manipulating religion to shore up power and control, and religious nationalists are capitalizing on such exploitation by teaming up in surprising ways across national boundaries to erode human rights and democracy. Autocrats are weaponizing religion to amass power and maintain control, from Russian Orthodox nationalism to Catholic nationalism in Hungary and Poland, to Hindutva in India, to Jewish nationalism in the new ruling coalition in Israel, to evangelical and Pentecostal forms of Christian nationalism in the United States and Brazil. religion is being manipulated to give moral sanction to hideous acts of violence that run contrary to our moral teachings. And the US Christian right is one of the more disruptive and globalized religious nationalist efforts. In the late 90s, they began exporting the American culture wars under the guise of something called the World Congress of Families. I was among the first to write about them when they flooded a UN meeting on women's rights in the year 2000. I wrote a book called Born Again Christian Right Globalized, and I began to lead interfaith coalitions to mount a feminist, faith-based argument for women's rights. I then went on to found and lead Faith in Public Life from 2005 to 2022. And you can imagine my horror when in 2016, on the heels of the election in the US that brought a xenophobic leader to power, I came across an article by Casey Michael in Politico. It was called How Russia Became the Leader of the Christian Right. The same World Congress of Families that I had written about had helped turn the American right's greatest foe into an ally. What happened? Around 2012, Putin began embracing Russian orthodoxy to build a unifying national identity that would replace communism, working closely with Metropolitan Bishop Kirill, who had an affinity for the World Congress of Families agenda. Using legislation drafted in the United States by the Christian right, Putin began cracking down on LGBTQ freedoms, abortion access, and Muslim rights. This made him a hero to many on the Christian right in the United States. In fact, in 2014, Putin's actions earned the praise of the three-time presidential contender and famous Christian nationalist culture warrior Patrick Buchanan. In a watershed town hall blog post, Whose Side is God on Now?, Buchanan suggested that God had abandoned the US and was now on Russia's side because Putin was banning homosexuals, abortion, and sacrilegious insults to religious believers. He called Moscow the godly city of today and the command post of the counter-reformation against the new paganism. Since 2014, the relationship between Christian right groups and the Kremlin, as well as other autocratic, ultra-nationalist world leaders, has only deepened. The World Congress of Families has now held over 15 conferences around the globe, sponsored often by autocrats in just about every region. And after each meeting, there is a fresh barrage of anti-LGBTQ, anti-child, and anti-women's rights legislation. Make no mistake, underneath the focus on issues of sexuality is a xenophobic agenda. This illiberal movement blames declining birth rates and what they see as a potential demographic collapse on abortion and LGBTQ people. But a close look at the rhetoric of their speakers reveals that their true fear is that whites are demographically being replaced by immigrants and refugees. This line of thinking is known as replacement theory, and it is rooted in white supremacy and historically tied to anti-Semitism. Just to illustrate the depth of this tectonic shift, in 2014, a conservative evangelical lawyer and a righteous American found his way into supporting a former KGB agent turned Russian president. That man was my dad. I was in Atlanta for Christmas. He came through the door, and I wasn't surprised to see him in his motorcycle riding jacket covered with travel badges, but I was surprised to hear one of my brothers ask, "Dad, is that a Russian pin on your lapel?" My dad could be eccentric. He just chuckled and changed the topic. I figured if my dad was wearing a Russian pin, it must be a joke. He passed away in 2014, but in 2016, I thought about that moment and I searched his Facebook page and his belongings, where I found more badges, one that bore the crest of the Russian Ministry of Interior Riot Police and one that read Military Branch of the Moscow Patriarchate. Unfortunately, my dad is not an outlier. He's a window into tectonic political shifts as well as a testimony to the success of Christian right organizing globally and Russian disinformation. A recent examination of polling data led by Dr. Samuel Perry revealed that since 2016, American attitudes toward Russia and Vladimir Putin have shifted, with Republicans becoming far more supportive of both. And though condemnation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 remains bipartisan, many Christian right leaders still support Putin and Russia. Samuel Perry's data revealed that American warmth toward Putin and Russia is reinforced by an ideology that seeks to institutionalize America's mythical Anglo-Protestant ethnoculture, Christian nationalism. These sympathies are even expressed by high-profile political leaders and top Republican presidential candidates. So what can we do? First, it is so critical that we speak boldly from our specific faith traditions to counter the rhetoric of religious nationalists, even as we model respect for all faiths. We cannot cede the language of faith to autocrats who perpetuate this outrageous lie that human rights and democracy are antithetical to faith rather than the fulfillment of our religious values. And to accomplish this, we need to better understand and use global communication strategies. We need to be able to shape a global narrative and imagination about what is morally possible. Second, recognize that autocrats concentrate power and control by creating social hierarchies and in and out groups based on sex, gender, race, religion, and class. We cannot let them divide us, no matter our stance on issues of sexuality or religion. We have to link hands far and wide as you possibly can, support groups that are under attack, and build relationships across ideological divides where possible. Phyllis began by reading the words of German pastor Martin Niemöller, who at first supported the Nazi regime because he was opposed to the leftist politics of his time. He later repented when he realized the Nazis had tapped his phone. He realized that he too needed to resist, and he went to jail because of it. His quote is on the wall of the US Holocaust Museum, and it of course begins, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out." In our time, this might look a little different. Maybe first they came for the LGBTQ people, and I did not speak out because my community was not comfortable with it. Then they came for the women. They came for the women, and I did not speak out because there were more pressing issues to deal with. Then they came for the immigrant and the refugee, and I said nothing because it was not politically expedient. They came for black voters, and I didn't speak out. They came for the Jews and the Muslims and the Sikhs, and I didn't speak out because I was in the majority. Then they came for me, and we know what happens. This is about all of us together, and we must urge our communities to never criminalize or discriminate in the name of faith. An attack on one is an attack on all. Our faith traditions were born out of great times of tyranny and oppression. Each tradition has within its sacred texts and histories a radical vision of dignity and equality for all of us and for care for creation. In these troubled times, may we light up the world with the true expressions of our faiths, that others may look at us and say, they did what their faith required of them. Thank you.
Please welcome flamenco dancer and choreographer, Omar Amaya.
Sí, va así. Vale, compadre, dale. Ay, 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 verás la puñal que por tu querer he mandado, verás la puñal la guitarra que por tu querer andado.
Please welcome the CEO at Engage Action, Alzayat.
Hello, everyone. Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. What an act to follow. That was amazing. Maybe another round of applause. Why should faith communities stand up for freedom and human rights? Why should those who profess a belief in God or a greater being stand up against tyranny and autocracy? To begin with, the very concept of faith or believing in a higher power is itself a call to improve our lives and the lives of those around us. To purify our thoughts and intentions and live according to an ethical and moral code of conduct in order to harmonize our relations with others. To treat each other well, to love one another, to build something greater together. To live purposeful, considerate lives and nurture our souls and the planet. A believer must be troubled by the lack of human rights and freedom because their absence means that injustice and oppression are present. That darkness is allowed to flourish despite the fact that believers are mandated to bring light into the world. In short, failure to confront oppression is a failure of faith, and we should never be comfortable with that. We are witnessing continued assaults on basic human rights and freedoms and the rise of autocracy. According to Freedom House, we are in year 16 of a global decline in freedom. 60 countries today experienced decline over the past year, and only 25 saw improvements. 38% of the global population lives in countries that are not free, the highest proportion since 1997. Only 20% live in what is considered free countries. Entire regions of this world are not free, including in Africa, the Arab world from Morocco to Iraq, in Asia, and elsewhere. And even inside democracies, there are serious troubles. Societal divisions, economic hardships, but also purposeful assaults against institutions and norms that have undermined public confidence in democracy as an idea and in practice, including here in America. We can debate how we got here, and this is an important exercise. The role of technology and social media in contributing to alienation and depression should rightly be investigated. Tools that were once conceived to bring us together seem to be even better at tearing us apart and allowing manipulation of our very way of thinking through disinformation campaigns. According to Amnesty, for example, Facebook's algorithms and pursuit of profit contributed to the atrocities perpetrated by the Burmese military against the Rohingya people in 2017. In India, hate against ethnic and religious groups is being spread through social media, WhatsApp, with deadly consequences. But we must recognize that this is not new in human history. Autocrats and human rights abusers have always worked hard to employ whatever tactics and tools available to hold onto power. Communities of faith are constantly courted by autocrats and populists because of the immense power they hold in inspiring masses and mobilizing politically. In America, you see forces on the right claiming to be defending Christians as they seek to deny people of color the right to vote and ban books about the lived experiences of Black people. In Europe, citizens of otherwise free societies are instigated against vulnerable migrants and asylum seekers by populist leaders. All too often, the religion of those refugees is used as the prime example of why they should be shunned and even targeted. If we are values aligned, then faith communities can lead the way in rejecting the politics of division and hate. By not allowing autocrats at home or abroad to pit people, fellow citizens, against one another and misuse religion in such a way, we must bring a new organizing principle into practice by aligning with one another based on shared beliefs in democratic principles and human rights, based on equality, justice, and the common good. We must not fall into the trap of speaking out only when our faith followers are persecuted or discriminated against. And we must certainly not defend human rights abusers who claim to carry out their abuses on behalf of our own co-religionists. How quickly do we spring to action when our own religious belief or its followers are attacked, but shy away from condemning abuses against another faith group because we are told we are being protected? We must recenter ourselves around the ethical core of our faith traditions. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Practically speaking, there are many of us, even during these times of declining belief in God and attendance at church or mosque or synagogue services, we are the majority. According to Pew Research, 84% of humans still believe in a faith tradition. They are religiously affiliated, even if loosely. That's a pretty big percentage. And those who are privileged to live in democracies have an obligation to exercise those rights that they enjoy on behalf of those who do not have them. Confronting injustice and oppression can come in many forms. It can be an act, it can be a word, or even a thought. But it must be something. Imagine a world where a big portion of this group spoke out in support of certain human rights and freedoms, like the freedom to be governed by representative and humane systems of governance, the freedom of expression and association, or the freedom to live without fear from the state and to be treated fairly by one's own government, to not be harmed or abused because of a person's religion, ethnicity, skin color, or sexual orientation. Unity does not require conformity. In the Holy Quran, God tells us, "O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female, and we set you up as nations and tribes so that you can be able to know one another. We can acknowledge and even celebrate our differences when our values are aligned and reaffirm our faith in God as the creator of a common home." Thank you, and peace be upon you.
Dear brothers and sisters, at the Parliament of the World Religious Conferences in Chicago, United States of America, thank you so much indeed for having me today. I am speaking to you from a country in crisis, for a people in peril, whose freedom has been stolen by genocidal military junta, and whose lives are at risk every day. I am speaking for a people whose children will be born at their school desk, whose women and children have been forced from their home. My home is in Burma, also called Myanmar. I'm in exile myself, forced from my country by the brutal genocidal military junta, unjust violence of a military coup in February of 2021. I am also speaking for people who have a hope. Myanmar has a hope. I have hope. the people of Myanmar have rejected the unlawful military coup. Buddhism, Christians, Hindu, Muslim, all walk of life, we stand as one against these who want us to cower, to live empty life to serve their greeds. We say no to this. We say yes to a life of dignity. We say yes to freedom. We say yes to defending human rights on the face of this brutality and inhumanity. Let me refer to you words of a Buddhist leader, a senior abbot, who in the presence of genocidal military generals last week chooses to speak not whistled words of collaborator, but the truthful words of a man of God. He said these three things, summarizing all Buddhist teaching into just three. Number one, not to do evil nor sin. Number two, to do good. Number three, to purify one's heart. As a believer whose faith is founded on the scripture, I am reminded of the Hebrew scripture and the prophet Isaiah, who in the chapter 1 says, wash yourself, make yourself clean, put away an evil of your doing from before my eyes, and cease to do evil. Learn to do good, speak justice, rebuke the oppressors, defend the fatherless, and plead for the widow. I see the same message in our Gospels and the teaching of St. Paul, that to avoid evil and to do good require all of us that we take the goodness into the life of those who need it. These three great faiths of religions teach the same. This is the greatest importance for my country of Burma. The last 30 months alone, the people of Myanmar have faced this genocidal military junta who have killed more than 4,400 innocent people, unjustly arrested 24,000 people, including 800 children, elected President U Win Mint and State Councillor Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, and have destroyed completely to the ashes more than 70,000 homes, including places of worship, schools, and hospitals. Here we are talking about the unspeakable pain and suffering and death and destruction of the people of Myanmar. The last 30 months alone, genocidal military junta have displaced nearly 2 million people and have forced more than 18 million people into the great needs of life-saving assistance. As a result, now, more than 48 million people of Myanmar are living under the poverty lines. Not only that, the genocidal military junta have been using religions as a weapon, starvation as a weapon, hunger, disease, rape as a weapon, including hate speech as weapons. The best example of the hate speech and religions being used by genocidal military in Myanmar is founded in the genocidal attack of Rohingya Muslim population in Myanmar. Here, I want to make another quote by Gardener Charles Mambo of Burma. The people of my country and all countries have a moral obligation to protect and promote dignity of all human beings. To demonize others is to live in unpeace. Compassion and mercy are the true eyes of my nation. Silence in the face of injustice is not a solution. It's not acceptable. Dear brothers and sisters, the last 30 months, when the genocidal military junta have been bringing that destruction, pain, and suffering to the people of Myanmar, the NUG, National Unity Government of Myanmar, have built more than 4,500 schools across the country and have built and operational more than 160 hospitals and 250 mobile clinics across the country. Not only that, the National Unity Government of Myanmar have created and trained more than 300 battalions of freedom fighters who are now, together with our alliance of freedom fighters, have controlled Myanmar territory more than half of the country territory. Dear brothers and sisters, not only that, we have been doing everything we can internationally, and we welcome ASEAN 5-point consensus on Myanmar and the UN Security Council Resolution 2669 on Myanmar and Burma Act of NDAA of United States of America. But the people of Myanmar need implementation and results on the ground. Dear brothers and sisters, we also urge all of you, please, to join us, to join pro-democratic forces and the forces who are defending freedom and democracy in Burma. Internationally, please call on your governments, international community, to sanction the military of Burma by cutting off them from international finances, international weaponry, and international political legitimacy. Dear brothers and sisters, today, once again, we like to urge all of you, we must speak for peace and work for peace and freedom. And the duty of religious leader to speak out against hate speech and the misuse of religions to justify their violence is now vital and crucial. Peace is always possible. Peace with justice. Dear friends, freedom is always possible. Human rights is always possible when we stand together as one. Dear brothers and sisters, the people of faith in my country have been long divided by this genocidal military junta, who wants to divide and therefore rules. We reject this. The language of faith speaks of peace with justice. I have hope. My country have hope. We have hope. And I ask you to share our hope to the world. Please pray for Burma. Prayer changes things. Please pray for peace in Burma and to raise your voices for the forgotten victims of this conflict in Burma. Speak out for us because right now our voice has not been heard in the world. Please become our voice. Please become the voice for the voiceless in your country, in your churches, in your community. Once again, thank you so much indeed for giving me this opportunity. May God bless you.
Please welcome founder and CEO of the Peace Department, an aspiring international peace builder, and a young philosopher on the nature of civilization and our existence on this planet, James Sternlicht.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is James Sternlicht. I run a small nonprofit organization called the Peace Department, which is focused on tackling global issues through a systems-based leverage points approach and through improving cross-sector collaboration. Our work thus far, we have worked with the Elijah Interfaith Institute, the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, and a number of other organizations to address the dysfunctions that we see in the global system, from leading interfaith mission of peace to Ukraine at the beginning of the conflict with Russia, to building solar and water systems for marginalized communities in the Holy Land and abroad. I also used to have more hair, apparently. So as our panel today focuses on crises, I will be highlighting a macro set of crises relating to conflict and climate change, and the interplay of these forces with the the rise of authoritarianism, and our vision for how communities of faith across the globe can work together to counter these threats and aiding the continued thriving of humanity on our planet, as well as a call to action. And there's a lot to cover in 8 minutes, so I'll try to be as concise as possible. So at this point, we are all familiar with the ongoing and brutal conflict that is currently raging in Ukraine. What we may be less familiar with is the role that Ukraine plays in global agriculture and food systems. Before the war, Ukraine would produce food for an estimated 400 million human beings around the world, the vast majority of which was for export, largely to the Middle East and North Africa. The Russia-Ukraine-Belarus base was also responsible for a substantial portion of the world's fertilizer exports, with these countries being responsible for nearly 20% of the global export supply. Now, if we look at where this fertilizer and food was going, it is largely to regions which are highly vulnerable not only to the supply chain issues, but to the effects of climate change, such as reduced water access, more violent flooding, crop failures due to heat, and the like. The combination of these factors is likely to cause severe insecurity for many of the most vulnerable across the developing world, which is on its own is a major challenge that obviously needs to be addressed. But where this intersects with the rise of authoritarianism is the nexus of this production of food systems and its influence on the movements of people and politics. There's an old adage that no society is more than 3 meals away from a revolution, or 3 missed meals away from a revolution. While the historicity of this statement is somewhat suspect, adding the stressor of food insecurity to areas which already face significant political instability and will have notable and significant effects. Putin has notably been offering African nations he deems as friendly small amounts of food in a bid for support in his war effort. And with various conflicts continuing to pop up in Africa, the ability of so-called strongmen to provide food to their people can exacerbate existing tensions and give power to authoritarian leaders. Further, and where it ties into the politics of the global north, is the displacement of people who are seeking a better life. In the US and Europe, a form of nativist, nationalist, and xenophobic rhetoric has already taken hold in certain elements of the population. The narrative around open borders, the odious claims of a great replacement, and a general frustration with or fear of immigration has already been used as a talking point for groups with more authoritarian leanings, paired with rhetoric around criminality and societal decline. Groups using this rhetoric include Putin's state-run propaganda machine, Hungary's Viktor Orban, the far-right AfD in Germany, and far-right political organizations in Italy, Argentina, and elsewhere, as well as white supremacist groups in the United States. From a faith-based perspective, where we are to love our neighbors and to love the foreigner, this is a rather heinous tack to take, but the threat to xenophobia, or the threat the xenophobia poses to democracy, is very real. Groups animated with trumped-up feelings of grievance and xenophobia have already taken action in the micro-scale of localized hate crimes and mass shootings, both of which are on the rise, with attacks on not only individuals and communities, but houses of worship, with which we are all familiar. Those animated by these feelings also have shown a willingness to attack democratic institutions because the perception of a threat, in essence, emotionally hijacks otherwise normal and rational people into a fight-or-flight response. Put another way, those who have made to understand that there is an enemy at the gates are far more willing to go along with the schemes to seize power as a way to have their supposed champions empowered to fight such a threat, even if it means overriding the will of the people or the institutions that allow for the corrective freedoms we so enjoy and so allow us to prosper. Now, the erosions of these institutions plays into a further systemic dysfunction. Governments appealing to increased nationalistic interests and animated bases have a reduced ability to cooperate at scale on crucial issues. as international policy is so much a continuation of domestic policy and attitudes. For confronting these challenges we face as a global society, cooperation across borders is necessary, whether we're helping our brothers and sisters across the world through aid and development assistance, or whether we're coming together to tackle the climate crisis. It's going to take all of us working together, sharing knowledge, sharing resources to move us towards a more stable path for a bright future. So, rising autocracy and toxic forms of nationalism pose not only a threat to democracy and freedom, but also to our collective future as inhabitants of planet Earth. And this all seems pretty dire, so how do we fix it? The answer, to me, lies in the power of community. Across God's green earth, there are north of 5.5 billion people of faith. Out of 8 billion, that's pretty good. People in communities which base at least some of their identity and adherence to the good word of the traditions which their faiths espouse. In the most basic sense, with many of those collected here today being shepherds of these communities, we must not only push for the return to humanitarian values which these faiths put forth, but also an adaptation of these values to the current crisis. There's nothing in the texts of the major traditions which justifies the destruction of our shared life support system with which we have been blessed. And in the spirit of do no harm, we should be looking at minimizing indirect harm to the health and livelihood of others as part of our daily practice to our most virtuous selves. On the micro, some of the actions we can take include using reusable water bottles instead of single-use plastics, planting community gardens and trees, shifting our houses of worship over to renewable energy sources. But in aggregate, across our communities, the billions of hands and hearts that can participate in such actions can make a serious difference. Many religious leaders have already taken this up. From the Pope's Laudato Si movement to the imams in Indonesia have declared a fatwa on plastic, to more than 50 significant faith leaders who joined with us under the leadership of Rabbi Alon Goshen-Goldstein and the Elijah Interfaith Institute to co-create an interfaith 10 spiritual principles of climate repentance as a framework for COP27. If we, as a community of people who believe in moral and practical value of doing good works, can strengthen our leadership around these issues, be more vocal, and lead aligned community activities, the institutions of our faiths can serve to alleviate the suffering of billions and light a new path towards a better future. Thank you.
Please welcome President and CEO of Interfaith Alliance, Reverend Paul Rauchenbush.
It is an honor to be with you here at the Parliament of the World's Religions. I come to this podium raised in an interfaith family, led by an interfaith heart, and having spent the last 25 years serving as a Christian minister, largely in interfaith settings and promoting interfaith work. As I look out at this amazing gathering of beautiful souls, I have to ask, what are we doing here? Each of us comes guided by our own interests to learn more about other traditions, to build bridges, to find common ground, to share the richness of our spiritual practice. These are some of the central activities of the interfaith work since the Parliament began. However, when I look at all of you who come not only as yourselves, but also represent hundreds, thousands, perhaps even millions of others in places both far and near, I see power. The power of people, the power of ideas, the organizational, spiritual, and moral power of religion that the world needs to meet the crisis that we face. And what is that crisis? Across the world, authoritarian movements are gaining control. They are headed by would-be dictators, but we must also acknowledge that too often they are legitimized and sanctified by religious leaders consolidating their own power for their own tradition and restricting the religious, social, and political liberty of those who are different and therefore labeled in their own country as the other, with second and third class status. Our particular threat in the United States is white Christian nationalism that claims the mantle of both faith and flag, but at its core is a crusade for power that betrays our nation and degrades my faith. They are guided by a Christian and white supremacist narrative that defines who can be a true American, a true Christian, and who really belongs in the country. As we are holding this parliament, Christian nationalists are attacking churches that do not agree with them. They are attempting to rewrite our history. They are banning our books. They are restricting voting and women's rights and targeting minority faiths. I come to this parliament with a particular vantage point. As a gay man who is married to my husband, and we have 2 precious children, my own family is a target, as books about LGBT people are among those that are most banned in this nation. Not saying gay has become the law of the land in Florida, and there are millions of my fellow Americans who do not believe I should be married or have children or even exist. Recently, the Supreme Court in the United States has ruled that people who provide services to the public can turn my family away. And here's the kicker. People point to the religious beliefs for the inspiration and rationale behind these attacks. Worse, there are right-wing activists from different faiths who have traditionally attacked one another, who are now banding together to target me and my family and other LGBTQ people under the misuse of the principles of religious freedom. To which I respond, whose religion and whose freedom? So I ask again, what are we doing here? To do interfaith work is by definition to perform the radical act of refusing to insist on our own way, even as our own traditions might invite us to such an impulse. Instead, the very genesis of the interfaith movement is to publicly declare that we will refrain from acting on those dogmas within each of our traditions that continues to provide a rationale to hate and to murder one another. The real difference among religions today is not between traditions, but how we understand our religion's mandate to act in the world. Does our tradition inspire us to celebrate or to discriminate? Do our beliefs prompt us to liberate or subjugate? Will we interpret our scripture and teachings in such a way that our religion is a bridge or a bludgeon? What are we doing here? Parliament of the World's Religions, we are here to love one another and to love the world. We are here to collectively and politically and publicly say no to the fascists of our time, and we will be guided by the ethos and the tactic of love that has guided so many great movements in the past. Gandhi, King, Mandela, Malala, and so many others across the world, each of them tapped into the deepest wells of the spirit and practiced a powerful, nonviolent resistance against the forces of cruelty and tyranny. Parliament of the world's religions, let us join together in a love that refuses to hate, a love that diffuses lies, a love that targets no one, a love that casts a vision for a future in which everyone has dignity and worth. Parliament of the world's religions, let us join together with a love that resists the fist with an open hand, that reaches to our neighbors for their hand and creates an ever-expanding circle of diverse people, faiths, races, backgrounds, and makes the irresistible invitation, join us. Together we will be powerful. Together we will meet this global crisis of authoritarianism. Together we will be guided by love. Together we will win. Thank you so much.
Hello and blessings to the 2023 World Parliament of Religion. I'm United States Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, and I want to welcome you virtually to the Windy City where you gather this day as pastor and as a pastor who serves in the United States Senate. I've dedicated my whole life to public service. Like all of you, I am inspired in that work by my faith. And so I'm glad to see people of faith from the four corners of the globe representing various faith traditions come together to once again affirm our connection to one another. Dr. King said we're tied in a single garment of destiny, caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. You clearly understand that, which is why your theme is Call to Conscience, Defending Freedom and Human Rights. That is the work we must do in this moment. There's no question that people of faith should lead the way. The Christian mystic and poet Howard Thurman is, for me, a great inspiration. And he said, ask not what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. May you come alive in this moment in which our democracy is being challenged here in the United States of America. May you come alive and fight for the most marginalized members of the human family. And may your faith inspire you to do all of that in the name of the God who loves us into freedom and frees us into loving. God bless each and every one of you. Keep the faith and keep looking up.
Please welcome Daily Beast columnist and public speaker, Wajahat Ali.
Assalamu alaikum. How's everyone doing? Thank you for that vibrant, amazing response. I appreciate it. I have been invited here to convert you all to Islam, the one true religion. All right, raise your finger. I'm just kidding. I just had to wake you all up. It was a joke. It was a joke. Thank you all for inviting me to participate in this important plenary on the multiple crises facing our communities, which include the rise of right-wing authoritarianism, global warming, disinformation, mass shootings, a pandemic, book bans, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and the normalization of cruelty and ignorance masquerading as piety and religious freedoms. But other than that, things are going great. Thank you. You need some dark humor for dark times. I am the son of Muslim Pakistani immigrants and an exhausted father of 3 cute kids, born and raised in the Bay Area, California, in the year of Empire Strikes Back, 1980. My parents decided not to teach me English because who needs English in the United States of America? So I learned English in Child's Hideaway Preschool, where I knew 3 phrases of English. Shut up, because my mother used to say shut up to me. Idiot, because idiot used to follow shut up. And uh-oh, pasgedio, because I couldn't say uh-oh, spaghettio. I learned English in ESL, English as Second Language, in the first grade, and by watching cartoons and Hollywood action movies in which brown people and Muslims who looked like me were often ridiculous stereotypes killed violently by Chuck Norris. Or at best, we were goofy sidekicks voiced and played by white men in funny accents. We were never the heroes of our favorite stories. I learned early on in America that if you aren't writing your story is being written for you by others. And if you aren't telling your story will always be told to you by others. Example, let's take the DeLorean back to 9/11. Overnight, Muslims became both us and them, citizens and suspects, natives and foreigners, an ally and a threat. Your citizenship, your bootstrap pulling abilities, you being a model minority did not protect you. During the 2010 midterm elections, there was no mention of CRT, critical race theory. Why? Because everyone was terrified of Sharia. Remember those days? They knew it was a threat that had to be confronted and destroyed, but like CRT, they couldn't define it or explain it or really show you where it was being implemented. Regardless, in order to feel great again, a coordinated, well-funded, right-wing incestuous ecosystem created this fictitious boogeyman to promote mosque bans, encourage the surveillance of Muslim communities, pass anti-Sharia bills, and win a few elections. Fast forward to today. And the Muslim threat has temporarily been replaced by the gays. Have you heard of the gays? Apparently in some places, and I don't want to get too political, but in some places you can't say gay. I won't mention the place, but it rhymes with Florida. Too soon? I'm a creature of the 80s, so I'm going to use old school pop cultural references. Have you seen the movie Beetlejuice? Yes? All right. So if you've seen the movie Beetlejuice, in order to get Beetlejuice, you have to say Beetlejuice 3 times. I think the same rule applies with the gays. I think if you say gay 3 times, the gay portal opens up and magically gays appear. Let's try it out. Gay, gay, gay. Are there any gays? Any gays? 1 gay, 2 gays, 3 gays. Magically, the gays have appeared. Welcome, gays. For the rest of us who are straight, we're still straight? Good? Yes, the world has not ended. But apparently don't say gay even though gay people exist. Don't say diversity, because if you say in some states, in some educational facilities, in some corporations, you will get fired. Also, don't teach African American AP Studies. Don't teach AP Psychology. In fact, some parents are more comfortable with their kids potentially getting COVID or shot at school than reading a book written by a black woman or being read a book by a drag queen at a library. The exact same anti-Sharia playbook that was used to win elections, stoke fear, and divide communities back in the day is being used today by the right wing to co-opt and win over religious communities, your communities, ahead of the 2024 elections. This time, instead of Muslims, they're scapegoating the LGBTQ communities, and specifically targeting transgender kids, the most marginalized of the marginalized communities. And folks, it's working like gangbusters, especially in the suburbs. It's a classic divide and conquer technique. You ban books, you pass anti-transgender bills, you scapegoat drag queens as threats, all under the guise of, quote, religious freedom and parental choice. And I am disheartened and saddened and shocked to see a few of my Muslim friends and leaders fall prey to this cynical and cold-hearted tactic. According to a few, the gay agenda has become an existential threat. Not climate change, not income inequality, not fascism. Nope, the biggest threat are the gays, specifically the trans, who are allegedly coming after your children. And you forget that this same fear-mongering was and is used against Muslims and Jews and Irish Catholics and Japanese Americans and Latinos and black people and women and immigrants. And despite that, some of us have still sadly volunteered to become halal chickens for Colonel Sanders, or kosher or vegan chickens. Why? Just to temporarily feel safe and comfortable. Look, I'm not Pollyanna. I don't do BS. I'm not here for a kumbaya. No offense to the kumbayas. I know we all have our differences on controversial topics such as abortion and gay marriage. But the question I ask for all of you is, how can we live in a pluralistic society, stand with a straight face, and demand our neighbors defend us when we are actively participating in spreading fear and hate? It is hypocritical. It is shameful. While your house is burning, I shouldn't be the one pouring gasoline. I should be the one pouring water. A healthy relationship requires reciprocity, good faith, and showing up for each other in moments of crisis. It does not require unanimous agreement on all things. At the very least, it requires an acknowledgement that your family, like mine, deserves to live with peace, security, and human dignity. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can at least agree on that. So, let's ride the DeLorean for the last time. I recall when a twice impeached, 4 times indicted Bulgarian, thank you, Georgia, said, "I think Islam hates us." When he was elected, he passed a Muslim ban. Surprise. Overnight, there was a multicultural coalition that came out at airports across the nation to stand shoulder to shoulder with Muslims. There were some rainbow flags there, folks. And I guarantee you all the folks that were there didn't agree with Islam or were down with a lot of our practices and teachings, but they were there. They showed up. And collectively, we said, not on our watch, not here. Don't try that hate in our small town. Too soon? Shout out, especially to Montgomery, Alabama, and Fade in the Water. I want to end by offering an invitation to all of you, especially the religious leaders. I invite you to choose discomfort. I invite you to choose to share and tell dangerous stories. Choose the short-term pain and rejection that you might face from some of your funders and loud community members, because you know, in the long run, our vibrant collective story is under threat from a global movement of hate that has hijacked terms like patriotism, nationalism, and religious freedom to pursue a perverse ideology of cruelty and white supremacy. The term for this movement is fascism. No need to play the game taboo. Call it for what it is. And they're coming after all of us. And once they're done with the gays, it'll be the Muslims, then the Jews, then the immigrants, then black people, and yes, even white Christians. If you don't believe me, talk to Mike Pence. The only way to confront this Thanos is to join and create what I call the multicultural Avengers. Diverse communities coming together to create a pluralistic society where all of our children have the chance to become the superheroes of the ongoing unfinished American story, inshallah. And to quote Edna from The Incredibles, no capes. Thank you, take care, be well.
Numberless women and men of all regions and religions strive to lead lives not determined by egoism, but by the commitment to their fellow humans and to the world around them.
Nevertheless, all over the world we find endless hatred, envy, jealousy, and violence.
In the great religious and ethical traditions of humankind, we hear the directive, "You shall not kill," or "Have respect for life."
Conflicts should be resolved without violence within a framework of justice. There is no survival for humanity without global peace.
A human person is infinitely precious and must be unconditionally protected. But likewise, the lives of animals and plants which inhabit this planet with us deserve protection, preservation, and care.
limitless exploitation of the natural foundations of life, ruthless destruction of biosphere, and militarization of the cosmos are all outrageous. We must cultivate living in harmony with nature and the cosmos.
Every people, every race, every religion must show tolerance and respect.
And high appreciation for every other. We invite all people, whether religious or not, to do the same.
The Parliament of the World's Religions calls all people, religious or not, to commit themselves to the values and principles of a global ethic. The Parliament also calls for people all over the world to signal their support for the global ethic by signing it. To show your support or to learn more, visit our website at www.parliamentofreligions.org/global-ethic-signatures.
Please welcome Professor of Radiation Oncology at Northwestern University and member of the Arcanian Orthodox Church of the USA, Gayle Wolenschak.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for sort of sticking with us for the duration of this program. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to the Parliament of World Religions about the Global Ethic Committee's first directive, and in particular to talk about the situation in Ukraine. I am a Ukrainian American and a member of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA. My cousin from Ukraine is currently a refugee in my home, and I house a refugee from Ukraine as a postdoctoral fellow in my research lab. We each hear daily of the atrocities that Putin is carrying out in Ukraine, the bombings, the butcherings of people in Bucha and elsewhere, the forced deportation of children and civilians, the sexual violence, and so much more. And while the photo and video images that come across our screens almost daily influence us, it is sometimes contact with persons that have experienced the war in Ukraine that help us understand it best. Recently, I had the opportunity to teach a theology class in Volos, Greece. It was offered for students from Ukraine. They were young clergy who were trying to understand theology better, and I particularly talked to them about some of the more modern innovations that are going on. Over the days when I was there, I got to know them well, and of course we talked about their lives and how they had changed because of the war. Every one of them had lost family and friends to the war. In some cases, a brother, in other cases, a father. They lost cousins. Everybody had lost numerous friends. While they were generally positive about life in general, when they spoke of their losses, they clearly felt them deeply, and some wept as they talked about them. In Ukraine, there are 2 Ukrainian Orthodox churches. I don't want to get into the politics there, but one church is independent of the Russian Orthodox Church, the other is under the Russian Patriarch, and is supportive of Putin's policies in Ukraine. These groups have argued about church property, alliances, and much more. In this group of 12 scholars, 3 were from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church that is under the Russian Patriarchate. The others were independent of Russia. What I found most interesting was how they got along well with each other and how they were blinded to the political alliances of their respective churches. Perhaps I could wish for that more here in the US. They had driven from Ukraine to Greece together in a minibus. They shared their stories and time on the road together and had become friends. This friendship occurred despite everything, and to me, I found it very comforting. But what was most uncomfortable to me was the great anger they all university felt toward Russia. It made me realize that the damage done by this war is not just physical, but is in the hearts and souls of Ukrainians who once loved and trusted their Russian brothers and sisters and others. And probably for the remainder of their lives, they will see them as the enemy. This will live for many generations as a long-lasting legacy to this war. As we reflect upon the first directive's words, quote, all people have the right to life, safety, and the free development of personality insofar as they do not injure the rights of others, unquote. We think about the fact that war begets war, hatred begets hatred. This cycle is hard to stop. Let us, as people of the Parliament of World Religions, not forget the power of prayer and spiritual healing. As we gather here, let us take a moment to pray for the people of Ukraine, to pray for healing, strength, and hope in these troubled times. Our prayers can transcend borders and inspire positive change. In Ukraine, there is a national salute that is used to express solidarity against aggression. That salute is Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine. And the answer back is Heroyam Slava, heroes have the glory. With that, I'll end, and I ask for your prayers for Ukraine. Thank you.
Please welcome Sandor Ironrope, member of the Lakota tribe.
Hokahe, mitakopi, ampete washte chichapelo, Sandor Ironrope imachapi. Na wocheke waji che unkaga pikte, onloa wocheke awahiktelo. Good afternoon, members of the Parliament of the World Religions here. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to each and every one of you. The traditions here at the Parliament of World Religions, the faiths, the tribes represented here in this moment of a call to consciousness, freedom, and human rights. And let us not forget the indigenous people of this land, the indigenous people of this territory here, the indigenous people of these biocultural medicines here today. Let us continue to remember the balance and harmony that the indigenous people have had and need to restore. The balance on this earth, Mother Earth, Onchimaka. Today here, I am honored to stand here to offer a prayer song on behalf of all of us in unity. And I would say thank you once again to the call of consciousness of the inner spirit of each and every one of us. We are here because we heard the calling. We are here because we believe in unity. We are here because we believe in love. We are here because we believe that there is an action and a responsibility in love. So thank you to each and every one of you. And the biocultures that we represent as a Lakota person, our Lako Wichoka, our traditional way, our medicine, our peyote way of life, the peyote traditions, Hikuri, the Yahe traditions, the tribes of the Amazon, the rainforest that is crying out today, Maui. Each and every one of these atrocities of the imbalance of the earth, the tribes of the Iboga, the Buiti traditions, the toad traditions of Mexico, the mushroom, the Mazotec tribes of Mexico, our indigenous people here in the United States. Thank you for being stewards of these traditions and for the next generation. The responsibilities that we have are true. Today here, I would like to offer a song that this song says that in our prayer, whatever it is that we are praying about shall be. Pray along with me in your wonderful prayerful thoughts. And this unity and this call to consciousness, let it be so. Hoye makiyayo, che makiyayo. Hoye makiyayo, che makiyayo. Hayero. Tako eko, hey chetuk teno, hoye makiyayo, yane pikteno, ayero. Tako eko, hey chetuk teno. Hoye makiyayo, yane pikteno, hayo. Oh, wakantaka niashtepelo. May peace and love and safety be with you all. Thank you. Pilama apelo.
This concludes the Crisis Plenary. We ask you to stay for the Climate Repentance Ceremony.